when a homeless man stopped Keanu Reeves on the street and asked, "Can you give me $1?" Keanu's response? No one saw it coming. It wasn't just about the money. What he did next left the entire crowd stunned. And by the next morning, the whole world was talking about it. Keanu had been walking alone, dressed simply, worn-out jeans, a black jacket, and his signature beanie. No bodyguards, no entourage. Just him, blending into the city like any ordinary guy. But the second the homeless man called out to him, the energy shifted. "Hey man, can you spare $1?" Keanu paused, not in annoyance, not to brush him off. He actually stopped. The homeless man, mid-40s, scruffy beard, worn-out clothes, had clearly been ignored all day. He expected the same from Keanu, but instead Keanu turned to face him. $1? Keanu asked, his voice calm, thoughtful. The homeless man nodded, confused. Most celebrities would keep walking, pretend not to hear. But Keanu? He stepped closer. Then, in a voice soft but firm, "How about something better?" The man blinked, and what Keanu did next left everyone around them in complete shock. The homeless man froze, unsure what Keanu meant. People on the street glanced over, a few slowing down to watch. A celebrity stopping to talk to a homeless man? Not something you see every day. Keanu reached into his pocket. The man's eyes followed his hands, expecting him to pull out some cash. Instead, Keanu pulled out a small, folded-up bill. He held it between two fingers, but instead of handing it over, he squatted down to the man's level. This wasn't a celebrity throwing money at a problem. This was human to human. "What's your name?" Keanu asked. The man hesitated. People usually didn't ask. "Mike," he mumbled. Keanu nodded. "All right, Mike, I'll give you this." He lifted the bill slightly. "But tell me something. When was the last time someone sat down and just talked to you?" Mike stared at him, unsure how to answer. Because the truth? No one ever did. People tossed coins. People ignored him. But this was different. A few passers-by stopped completely now, pretending to check their phones while secretly watching. Keanu waited, patient. Finally, Mike let out a breath. "Man, I don't even remember." Keanu gave a small smile. "Then how about we change that?" And what happened next? Nobody was ready for it. Mike looked confused. Most people would just toss some change and walk away. But not Keanu. Instead, he sat down, right there on the sidewalk next to Mike. People walking past stared. A few even took out their phones, recording the moment. Mike looked at him, still in shock. What are you doing, man?" Keanu grinned slightly. "You asked me for $1. I'll give you more than that. But first, tell me your story." Mike hesitated. Nobody had ever asked. He swallowed hard, glanced down at his worn-out shoes, then back up at Keanu. "Man, I used to have a life, you know? A job, a home, everything. But then, stuff happened. Bad choices. Worse luck. One thing led to another, and here I am." Keanu just nodded. No judgment, no pity, just listening. Mike laughed bitterly. "People walk past me every day. Some pretend I don't exist. Others tell me to get a job. But you're actually sitting here." Keanu leaned back, resting his arms on his knees. "You know why?" Mike shook his head. Keanu's voice was calm but serious. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything." The crowd watching grew bigger, because nobody expected Keanu to say that, and what he revealed next left everyone speechless. Mike stared at Keanu, trying to process what he just said. "You lose everything?" he scoffed. "Come on, man, you're rich, famous. You got it all." Keanu's smile faded slightly. He looked down at his hands for a moment, as if remembering something painful. Then he took a deep breath and spoke. "Mike, when I was young, my dad walked out on us. My best friend died of an overdose. I lost the woman I loved in a car accident. And my daughter? She never even got to take her first breath." Silence. Mike's face fell. The people watching? Frozen. Because nobody ever really thinks about what someone like Keanu Reeves has been through. Keanu continued, voice steady but full of real emotion. "I know what it's like to feel like the world has taken everything from you. To wake up one day and realize You don't have a home anymore. You don't have a family anymore. You don't even have a reason to keep going." Mike nodded slowly, swallowing hard, because for the first time in a long time, he felt understood. Keanu looked him in the eyes. "But you know what I learned?" Mike shook his head. Keanu's voice was calm but firm. "As long as you're still here, as long as you're still breathing, it's never too late to turn things around." Mike blinked fast, trying to keep himself together. And then, Keanu did something nobody expected, something that would change Mike's life forever. Keanu reached into his pocket. Mike watched closely, expecting him to finally hand over some cash. But what Keanu pulled out? It wasn't money. It was a business card. Mike squinted at it, confused. "What's this?" Keanu smiled slightly. "A fresh start." Mike looked down at the card. It had a name, a phone number, and an address. Keanu tapped it with his finger. "I know a guy, owns a small business. He's always looking for hard workers. You go to this address tomorrow, tell them Keanu sent you." Mike's hands shook. You serious, man?" Keanu nodded. "Dead serious." Mike let out a breath, staring at the card like it was the most valuable thing he'd ever held. Keanu wasn't done. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a thick stack of cash. Not $1, not 10, hundreds. He placed it in Mike's hand. "This isn't charity, this is a chance. Get yourself cleaned up, get a meal, and show up to that address." Mike's hands clutched the money, his breathing unsteady. For the first time in years, he had hope. And the people watching, some were crying, some were clapping, some were just speechless. Because Keanu Reeves didn't just hand out $1. He gave a man his dignity back. But what Mike did next made this story even crazier. Mike sat there staring at the cash in his hands. His fingers tightened around it, his breath shaky. For the first time in a long time, he had a choice. He could take the money, get a meal, maybe find a place to crash for the night. Or he could actually take the chance Keanu was offering. The people around them were watching closely, some still recording, others just stunned at what they had just witnessed. Mike looked up at Keanu. "Man, I don't know what to say." Keanu gave him a small nod. "Then don't say anything. Just show up." Mike swallowed hard, blinking fast. Then, he did something no one expected. He shoved half the cash back into Keanu's hands. The crowd gasped. "No, man," Mike said, voice cracking. "I appreciate this, more than you know. But I don't need all of it, just enough to get back on my feet." Keanu raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Mike wiped his face, exhaling sharply. "I want to do this right. I want to earn it." Keanu smiled. Not a Hollywood smile, a real one. That's all I needed to hear. And in that moment, it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about belief. Keanu stood up, offering his hand. Mike hesitated, then took it. The two shook hands, solidifying something bigger than a simple act of kindness. And as Keanu turned to leave, Mike looked down at the card in his hand. Because tomorrow, his life was about to change. But what happened when he actually showed up to that address? No one was ready for it. The next morning, Mike stood outside the address on the card. It wasn't some corporate office. It was a small auto repair shop. Nothing fancy, just a simple, well-kept business on the edge of town. He hesitated. Was this real? Did Keanu actually mean what he said? He took a deep breath, gripping the business card tightly. Then, he walked inside. A man in his early 50s looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you?" Mike swallowed hard. Yeah, Keanu Reeves sent me." The man froze. His expression shifted from curious to serious. He set down his clipboard. "You're Mike?" Mike nodded slowly. The man studied him for a second, then gestured toward the back. "Come with me." Mike followed him through a garage filled with cars, tools, and mechanics working hard. The man finally stopped, turned to face him, and said, "Keanu called me last night, told me about you, said you needed a fresh start." Mike exhaled, nodding. "Yeah, I do." The man crossed his arms. "You ever worked on cars before?" Mike hesitated. "Not really, but I can learn." The man nodded, thinking for a moment. Then he tossed Mike a set of coveralls. Good, because around here we don't give handouts. We give people a chance. Mike caught the coveralls, looked down at them, and for the first time in years, he felt like a person again. Mike gripped the coveralls, his hands shaking. This wasn't just a job. This was a second chance. The shop owner watched him closely. We start early, we work hard, no excuses. Mike nodded fast. I won't let you down. The owner gave a small, approving nod. Good, because Keanu doesn't waste his time on people who don't mean what they say. Hearing Keanu's name hit different, Mike couldn't believe it. A Hollywood star, one of the biggest in the world, had taken a chance on him. And now, it was his turn to prove he was worth it. The first few days, brutal. Mike had never worked in a shop before. His hands were blistered, his back ached. He made mistakes, lots of them. But every time he messed up, he showed up again the next day. The mechanics? At first, they didn't take him seriously. A homeless guy getting a job straight from Keanu Reeves? Sounded like a joke. But Mike, he worked hard. He didn't complain. He didn't quit. And after a few weeks, the crew started to respect him. Then one day, the shop owner pulled him aside. Got something for you? Mike wiped his hands on a rag. What is it? The owner reached into a drawer, pulled out a fresh paycheck. Mike froze. It wasn't just a couple of bucks. It was real money. Enough to get a tiny apartment, enough to stop sleeping on the streets. His throat tightened. I don't know what to say. The owner smiled. Then don't. Just keep working hard. Mike nodded, gripping the check like his life depended on it. Because in many ways, it did. And just when he thought things couldn't get any better. Keanu walked back into the shop. Mike froze. Keanu Reeves, standing right there in the shop, dressed in his usual laid-back style, hands in his pockets, watching. For a second, Mike thought he was imagining it. But no, this was real. The shop fell silent. Even the other mechanics, who were usually loud and busy, stopped what they were doing. The shop owner crossed his arms and grinned. Told you he'd come back. Mike swallowed hard, his heart pounding. He wiped the grease off his hands and walked toward Keanu. You actually came back? Keanu nodded. Told you this wasn't charity. I wanted to see if you'd show up. Mike laughed nervously, shaking his head. Man, I didn't just show up. I worked my ass off. Keanu smirked. I can see that. He glanced around the shop, noticing how the other mechanics were watching. They weren't doubting Mike anymore. They were respecting him. Keanu turned back to Mike. So tell me, how's it feel? Mike exhaled, looking down at his worn-out boots. Feels different. He looked back up, his eyes full of something they hadn't held in years. Hope. Feels like I finally belong somewhere. Keanu smiled. Then, he pulled something out of his jacket pocket. Mike's eyes widened. It was a key. Mike's voice caught in his throat. Wait, is that? Keanu held it up. It's not a gift. It's a reward. Mike reached out, his hands shaking, and took it. He turned it over in his palm, barely able to process what was happening. You got me a car? Keanu shook his head. Number you earned a car. The entire shop exploded in cheers. The other mechanics clapped him on the back, some laughing, some just stunned at what they were witnessing. Because this wasn't just about a car. This was proof that Mike had turned his life around, and the man who had once been begging for a single dollar was now driving away in a car he earned, with his own two hands. But Keanu, he wasn't done just yet. Mike stood there staring at the key in his hand. He ran his fingers over it, like he needed to feel it to believe it was real. Keanu watched him, waiting. Then, Mike laughed, a real, genuine laugh. Man, this is crazy, Keanu smirked. Is it? Or is it exactly what was supposed to happen? The rest of the mechanics nodded in agreement, because everyone there had seen it. Mike earned this, not through luck, not through handouts, through sheer hard work. Mike looked up at Keanu, his expression serious now. Why me, man? You could have helped anyone. Why did you stop for me that day? Keanu thought for a second. Then in a voice steady and real, he said, because I know what it's like to need a second chance. Silence. That hit deep. Mike's eyes burned, but he refused to cry. Instead, he gripped Keanu's hand and shook it. Hard. "Thank you, man. I mean it." Keanu nodded. "Don't thank me. Just keep proving to yourself that you deserved it." Mike took a deep breath, looked at the key one more time. Then, he walked over to his new car. The whole shop watched as he got in, started the engine, and let the reality sink in. A few months ago, he was on the street begging for a single dollar. Now, he was driving away in a car he earned. And Keanu? He just watched him go, a small smile on his face, because he knew. Mike's story wasn't ending here. It was just beginning, and the internet had no idea what was coming next. The moment Mike drove off, the internet took over. Someone had recorded the entire exchange. The moment Keanu stopped, the moment he gave Mike a chance, the moment Mike earned his way back. And when that video hit social media, it exploded. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Keanu Reeves just changed a homeless man's life. This is why we love him. From begging for $1 to driving his own car, this story is unreal. People couldn't believe it. Some called it the most inspiring thing they had ever seen. Others admitted, "This made me rethink how I see people on the streets." And the best part? Mike saw it. He scrolled through the comments on an old borrowed phone. People from all over the world were rooting for him. For the first time in years, he felt like he mattered again. And then, the biggest shock of all. One of the comments stood out. It wasn't from a random fan. It was from a job recruiter. "If you're serious about turning your life around, we have an opening at our company. Full-time. Good pay, let's talk." Mike stared at the screen. His hands shook. This wasn't just a moment. This was a movement. And Keanu? He had no idea what he had just started. Mike couldn't believe it. A few months ago, he was sleeping on the streets, invisible to the world. Now, companies were offering him jobs. He reread the comment, his heart pounding. "If you're serious about turning your life around, we have an opening at our company. Full-time. Good pay. Let's talk." This wasn't some random offer. This was real. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the screen. Was this really happening? Would they still want him once they knew his past? But then, he thought about everything Keanu had said. As long as you're still here, it's never too late to turn things around. He took a deep breath, and then he responded, "I'm ready." Within minutes, his inbox was flooded, not just with job offers, but with support. Strangers from all over the world were cheering him on. Some sent donations, some shared their own stories of struggle. Some just wanted to say, "Keep going, man. We believe in you." Mike wiped his face, because for the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, he was living. And Keanu? He hadn't even heard about the viral video yet, but when he did, his reaction shocked everyone. Keanu had no idea. He had moved on with his life. Another day, another movie set, just doing what he always did. Then one morning his phone buzzed. A friend had sent him a link. "Dude, have you seen this?" Keanu clicked it, and what he saw stopped him in his tracks. It was the video. The moment he stopped for Mike, the conversation, the handshake, the car. But now it had millions of views, thousands of comments, and the headline? Keanu Reeves changes a homeless man's life, but the story doesn't end there. Keanu scrolled through the comments. People weren't just praising him. They were talking about Mike, his job offer, his story, his second chance. Keanu exhaled, shaking his head slightly, not out of frustration, out of pure amazement. He had stopped to help one man. Now, that one moment had turned into a global movement. And Keanu? He wasn't done yet. He picked up his phone and made one final call. What happened next? Nobody saw coming. Keanu dialed the number. The line rang once, twice, then someone picked up. "Hello?" It was Mike. His voice sounded different now, stronger, more confident. Keanu smiled. "So, I hear you've been busy." Mike laughed, shaking his head. Man, you have no idea. Keanu could hear the excitement in his voice. I saw the video, Keanu said. You're kind of famous now. Mike let out a breath. Yeah, crazy, right? People are actually reaching out to help. I've got job offers, a place to stay. It's like everything changed overnight. Keanu nodded even though Mike couldn't see him. No, Mike, it didn't change overnight. You changed it. Mike went silent because for the first time he realized Keanu was right. He had put in the work. He had earned this. And then Keanu dropped the biggest surprise of all. Listen, I'm working on a new charity project, helping people get back on their feet. And I was thinking, who better to be involved than someone who actually knows what it's like? Mike's jaw dropped. Wait, are you saying? I'm saying, if you're up for it, I want you to be part of this. Mike couldn't speak. His whole life he had been on the outside looking in. Now, he was being asked to help others. He took a deep breath, gripping the phone tighter. Keanu, I'm in. And just like that, Mike went from being the one who needed help to the one giving it. Because sometimes all it takes is one person willing to believe in you, and the person Keanu had once stopped for on the street was now about to help change lives, just like his own had been changed.